Hi everyone, Dr. Stephen Huss here from ResourceYourHealth.com. In this video, I want to talk about a blog post that I did about whether or not someone could die of heartache or being heartbroken, and then I'm going to talk about some of the mechanisms of how that could actually happen. So in the medical world, this broken heart syndrome is known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. And they would say that they see, heart arrhythmias and things like that from someone who's really suffering from heartache. But in history, it's been shown that there's been stories of people that could die of being heartbroken of a heart attack. And so I want to talk a little bit about why or how that could be. So to do that, we have to look at the stress response how it evolved in us mammals. So before mammals, there was reptiles, and their stress response was conducted through a signaling pathway that was one pathway of the vagus nerve called the dorsal motor nucleus. And whenever their stress response got overwhelmed, they would have this freeze response where they would basically shut down organs and convince their assailant or whoever was or whatever the stress was that they were dead. But reptiles have a very slow metabolism. They're cold-blooded, so they can do that without actually causing permanent damage to their organs, because whenever that stress response goes away, they can recover. However, in order for mammals to evolve and become what mammals became, they were much more metabolically active, and they have a higher body temperature to maintain. And so shutting down of organs like that is not a good idea. So we needed to evolve a way to have a stress response without shutting down organs, or with the potential to shut down organs. And so we evolved, or mammals, way before humans, like 225 million years ago, evolved this dual pathway of the vagus nerve. So now we had that old dorsal motor nucleus there, but we also have this newly evolved nucleus ambiguus. And so that allowed mammals to have a stress response, a very stress reaction to a stressful situation, without compromising organs. Okay, so now we have to look at how that stress response works in the natural world. So for a mammal in the natural world, usually the stress response is totally shut off. But if a threat came out of the bushes or something and something tried to eat them, they would have a normal stress response, and that would mobilize blood and turn on mechanisms in the body that would allow them to get away from that threat or fight it off. But then if they got away from that threat, their stress response shut off completely, almost within minutes, almost like the stress never happened. And so if we compare that to humans in the modern world and our modern environment, there's quite a mismatch between that evolved stress response that we have because we're mammals, and our modern world. So in our modern world, we're bombarded with all these unnatural stressors, everything from all the unnatural sounds we hear, all the unrealistic demands of society, and putting us in that stress response 24/7. I mean, humans are the only species that can think their way into a stress response. Other mammals can't do that. Other species in general can't do that. We have this really high level thinking, and it's done us a lot of good over the years, and gotten us to where we are. But it's not so great for keeping our stress response nice and balanced, because now we could see something happen to someone else and stress out about it happening to us. We could have something stressful happen to us, and instead of shutting down the stress response once we got away from that threat like mammals do, we think about it the rest of the day or the week or the month. And we're very dependent on money to get all of our resources, and it's stressful to be very dependent on one thing. And so we can really think our way into this stress response. Now, our emotional state has a direct connection to our heart. That's why we say things like, I love you with all my heart, or you gave it all your heart. There's this emotional connection to the heart. And so when we have an imbalanced stress response, it has a huge impact on the heart. And when we have that imbalanced stress response, it's a huge component of what causes a heart attack. There's research that shows that 95% of heart attacks are preceded by a decrease in heart rate variability, which is the best indicator of how balanced our stress response is. So when we have that surge of adrenaline signal to our heart cells, what can happen is that if we don't have enough nitric oxide present, which happens when we increase oxidative stress, then that surge of adrenaline can force the heart to burn glucose, and the heart does not like to do that. And so when it does that, it builds up lactic acid, which causes damage through swelling and through interfered calcium absorption. And so that can lead to a heart attack. That can lead to tissue death. And so you can kind of see how this imbalanced stress response, from our evolved stress response and our current way of thinking, or our modern world and our higher level thinking, have created this mismatch. And so, an emotional heartache, something like that, could be one way that we think our way into a stress response. We are so distraught and so upset that, and we think it's the end of the world. We lose this person, and we think it's the end of the world, and we think our way into a stress response. And if our stress response, or if our autonomic nervous system gets overburdened, we have to remember that old dorsal motor nucleus pathway of the vagus nerve that reptiles, it's all they had, is still there in us. And if the nucleus ambiguous part of our vagus nerve gets overwhelmed and shut down, then we revert back to that old way. And this is the work of Dr. Stephen Porges, who spent his life studying the vagus nerve. And when we revert back to that old way of doing things, we could end up with issues. And that what happened in reptiles was that they had organ shutdown. And so when we get this overwhelming stress response from potentially this emotional distraughtness that we have, then yes, it could send us down the path to what would be a heart attack and an organ shutdown like those reptiles had. And we mammals cannot survive that organ shutdown. So best ways to make sure that you rebalancing your autonomic nervous system are contact with nature, loving relationships, community, mindfulness practice. Those types of things will really balance your autonomic nervous system. And I believe the best strategy for going through heartache is to not isolate yourself, because we tend to want to do that when our heart's broken. We just don't want to talk to anybody. We're miserable. But the best thing you can do is to reach out to somebody or to a group of people, find support to get you through that heartache. Just do not isolate yourself. All right, so that's it for now. Head over to the blog post and read all the details. If you like this video, please like and share it. Otherwise, stay healthy out there.